Hey guys, so welcome back to our tutorials. In today's tutorial, we're going to create this social login page like. So this one, it looks like a page. We're going to create this using HTML and CSS, and without wasting time, let's get started. So I have two files in my directory. I have the index.html, the style.css. So I'm just going to link the CSS with the HTML file. Then the next thing is that I'm going to go live, and then that's my live. The other thing you might notice that we have this icon. This icon, I've used it as an SVG. So you can go to my GitHub repository called TikTok-projects, and my username is TecWithTwin. So, and then look for social login. And then in the images, you're going to find that right arrow SVG there. So let's continue. So what I'm thinking about here is that we need a parent div. So the parent div that will hold the whole content. And then inside we need another div because you can see all these items are clustered together. So we cannot put them in the parent div. So we need another div inside, which can now scope the elements with. So I'm going to create a div with a class of login. And inside the login, I'm going to create another div that is called content. Because as I said, I need two divs. The first is the outer div, which has this linear gradient, and the inner div, which now will scope the elements to their required sizes. And then here I'm going to create a heading level 2 and say already working together plus this title you can see here. And then on the bottom there we have a paragraph that says login to your account and connect with your teammates. Right? So that's just a paragraph. And then now you can see this section where it has an input. It also has a button. So I'm going to create a div here, which will hold those two. And this div will have a class of input group. So you can say input group. And as you can see, this is clearly an input group. And this icon is displayed obsolete to that input. So next up is let's create the input. And the type is email. And then we don't need the name. The placeholder is your email dot at address.com. And then let's create that icon. So how we can create that icon is just, we can use an image. We can use a button. We can wrap the image inside a button because it is going to be clicked. It's good for screen readers or maybe the browser to understand that this is a button. So we create the image and the source will be images. So let me drag that here. So we can create a folder called images. Okay, the folder is called images, and then let me look for that SVG. And then you can see it there. That's the SVG we are working on. And here we just say images and then grab the right arrow in SVG. And then you can see it's very huge. It is filling the whole page. So what we can do, we can give it a width of maybe 20. All right, and then you can see it there. So that's good work. Let's continue. The next thing you need now after the button is now the group or with avatars. So this one will be outside because this one is positioned absolute to the parent. The parent is the login. So you're going to say avatar group. And then inside the avatar group, you're going to create divs with class of avatar. So you can say dot avatar times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times 5. And then plus image. Now let's control Z here. And then I'm just trying some shortcuts. All right. So this is how you can create a div with avatar, a class of avatar, but you want to create 5 times and then create a child tag of image. So this is what this one signifies. Then if we save, you can see now you have 5 divs each with the class of avatar, and then there's an image inside. So let's style this, and then here, and then we save, and then I'm going to use a placeholder avatar. So the placeholder avatar I'm looking forward to is, let me just paste it. So we have, let me copy it. So then we can paste that. So I'm going to paste on all these images. And then we paste that. But now the second one will be 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is just a placeholder image. And these images, you can see them. These are placeholder images using the pravatar.cc. And then you specify the width. And then we also specify the width here and say we want a size of 50. So we can say width. So command Z width. Then you say 50. All right, now they look a bit nice. And then we are done with our HTML. Let's go to the CSS. Take note of these classes. We have the avatar group, we have the content, but let's start styling the login parent div. Something else you might want is the fonts. So head over to fonts.google.com, then look for a font called Poppins. That's what I'm going to use. Look for Poppins. Then on the bottom, you'll see a button that says Get Font. Just click it and then click Get Embed. And then grab go from web, go to link, and then import. This import is what you are going to add to the CSS. Something else you might want to know is that you can enable the fonts you want by clicking the edit button. So you can click that, and then I only loaded 400, 500, and 600 font weights. So you can do the same, paste that in, close Google Fonts, and then let's add some default CSS styles, margin 0, padding 0, box sizing, border box. So these are just prerequisites for CSS. And then let's grab the body and display it flex. Then you can justify content to the center. I want this to be in the center. And then let's grab the login div, which is a parent. And then let's give it a width of maybe 450 pixels. Right? And then we want this gradient. To get that gradient, go to gradient, cssgradient.io, and then add your colors. I have this color A and then color B. Then you can generate a linear gradient from that. And then on the bottom, you can see an option to copy. So we can go to the login and then paste that in. Now, if we come here, you can see now that has been added. So the next thing we need to do now is to specify the font family. So we can go to the body, font family, and then we can say Poppins, then sans serif as a fallback. Then you can see it. The next thing, let's display flex to the avatars. The avatars are inside the avatar group div. So we can say dot avatar group, then display it flex, and then let's add a gap of maybe, let's first not add the gap. Let's see how it looks. You can see they are too close to each other. Then let's add the gap now. Say 0.4. That's very nice. The next thing, you can see that the finished version is circular and it has a whitish border. So you can come here and we can grab the avatar from the avatar. So from the avatar, you can grab the image, add a border radius of 50%, and then a border of 3 pixels solid white. All right, that looks a bit nice. And then the reason I'm using the dot avatar is because of this div, and then grab the image. So dot avatar and then the image. And we also have the avatar group, which is a parent of all these avatars. All right, something else you might notice is that inside the parent card, the padding is off. And you come here, you can see now we have huge padding on the bottom. Then all the others are the same. So what we can do is the padding to the login. So we can say padding top we want 2 rem, right we want 2 rem. So it goes clockwise. So top, right, bottom, left. So top 2 rem, bottom. We want 3 rem on the bottom. We want because of the space to add these avatars, and then 2 rem on the left hand side. So if you come here, you can see it has been added. The next thing, let's add some paddings to the body. So we can say padding to maybe 2 rem. Right, you can see it looks nice. Also, we can change the color of all the elements by saying color white. Right, it looks nice. The next thing, let's add some border radius to the login card. So we can come here and say border radius of 5 pixels. And then that looks nice. The next thing is to align these items to the center. They are called the content. So you can do the dot content. And then the dot content, what we want is to display flex. And then the flex direction should be column. Right? Doesn't change much, but we want to add some gaps between these elements. So we can do gap maybe 0.5. Right. Right, you can see some gaps has been created. So the next thing we want now is to reduce the width of this content, because the finished version, you can see the content has it has a lesser width. So we can come here and say the width, take 85% of the space. Right now it is taking 100, but let's take 85%. And then let's place it in the middle. So we can do margin top bottom of 0 and left right auto. This one places it in the middle. You can see it has placed the content in the middle. Let's also target we can also say align items to the center. We want to align everything to the center. Then text align as well to the center. Right, it looks a bit nice. So finally, let's grab the paragraph. So we have the dot content and then the paragraph. So we can grab that paragraph by saying dot content, and then the paragraph. Then the font size is 0.7 rem. All right, that looks a bit nice. And then the width of the paragraph, let's reduce it to around 80%. And then we achieve this way. All right, so the next thing we want to work on is the input group. As I said, the input group, this input group houses the input and the button. So the button will be displayed absolute to the input group. So let's grab the input group here and say input group. Let's give it a width of 100%. And then let's add a border radius of maybe 1 rem. And then position of relative. So let's also grab the button. So we can say dot input group, and then we grab the button, and then position absolute. And then we also need to grab the input itself. So we can say input. We only have one input, so we can grab it by its tag name. Let's first change its background color to hash 7E93DE. Right, you can see it. And then let's remove some borders. You can see the borders are very ugly here. And then the width should be 100%. Right, you can see it. All right, then let's add some paddings to the input. So we can do some paddings. Padding. Top, bottom, vertical 8 pixels, horizontal 10 pixels. All right, you can see it. And then let's do some colors. So you want a color of white whenever you type. All right, that looks nice. Let's grab let's go back to the button. And the button, what we want to do is let's add some paddings to the button. So let's add some padding, 0.2 rem. Then we want the right to be 0. All right, the right is now the 0. We want this icon to be exactly in the middle. So what we can do is we can use flex. We can say display flex. And then justify content center and align item center. We want to place that icon in the middle. Right? And then let's make sure that we don't want this button to be at the edges. So we want it to be somewhere in the middle of this input. So we can give it a height of 80%. So that looks a bit nice. Let's remove some borders on it. You can say border none. All right. And then, so the right is 0. And then the top is, let's do a top of 50%. And then, as I showed in my previous tutorials, is how we can use position to position something in the middle. So we use the transform. And then we translate. And then the x-axis, we can do maybe 10 pixels, no 10%, so that we can push it quite a bit from the edge. And then negative 50% on the y-axis. So you can see where that icon went. And then, so this one translates it 10% backwards of its width in the x-axis. And then this one pushes it back its height by half. So this one is negative 50%, which pushes it back in the y-axis. This is the y-axis, this is x-axis. So by pushing it negative 10, we go this way, 10%. Pushing it negative 50% on the y-axis, it goes upwards, negative 50%, which makes sure that it is in the middle. I did a tutorial on this, so you can go ahead and check it out. So something else, let's add some border radius. So we can say border radius of 50%. All right, you can see it. And then to make sure that the height and the width are the same, we can add an aspect ratio of 1:1. Right, that doesn't look quite bad. So let's go to the input group. We have a border radius on the input group, but the input is overflowing. So we can come here and add an overflow hidden. So that way you can look here, you can see that the input is overflowing, but we have already specified the border radius to the input group, which is its parent. And then now everything now sets up itself. Next up is to style the placeholder. You can see the placeholder is not visible. So to style the placeholder of an input, you do input and then capture the placeholder and give it some color. Let's do white, but we are going to reduce the opacity of this white color. All right, that looks nice. So we are moving forward. The next thing is to place this div here. So how we can do it is that now the avatar group, let's position this absolute. So we can come here and position absolute, but now we need to give the parent a position of relative. Position of relative. So the avatar group is a child of the login card. So you can see this is the avatar group. It's a child of the login. So we give the login a position of relative, this one a position of absolute. All right. And then after doing that, we can now position it anywhere we want. The first thing is that we want it to have a bottom of 0. Come here and say bottom 0. We also need it to be at the middle, to be created from the middle. So we can give it a left of 50%. But the issue with this is that this one goes ahead to the 50% mark and then draws there. That means we need a way to shift it by its width backwards. How do we do that? We use the transform. So we can say transform and then translate the x-axis. This is the x-axis. As you can see, we started drawing at 50% and then we rendered that component there. But to make sure that it is in the middle, we need to push it back by 50% of its width. So how do we do that? We push it by negative 50% of its width horizontally, and then vertically we want it to sit here in the middle as well. So we need to push it down its height. So we need to push it 50% down the y-axis. And then that's where it ends up at. So finally, let's add this. You can see there's like some grayish border. It's not a border. We used some absolute positioning. So we go ahead and grab the login form. So it is in the login. So we can come here and say .login. Let's style its pseudo selector before. Then first of all, we give it a content of an empty content. The reason we use content is because you can add some symbols here, which is a content of the before. Maybe you wanted to show a greater than hand sign, but in our case, we don't want. And then the login is displayed relative. This is okay. So what we are going to do is now we have an issue, but let's first add the background color. So the background color is hash DC E6FA. So you can see it right now. The next thing, let's add some, let's do a top of 0. By top of 0, we say that the top here is 0. And then let's do left of 0, right of 0, bottom of 0. Right, and then the position is absolute. You can see it, it overlays on top. So let's add a red color here. No, let me copy this. Then let's use red. It overlays on top, but we want it on the bottom, so we can do Zen index of -1. Now it is completely behind, but we want it to shift with a consistent width across the board. So how we can do this is now we need to increase its height. So how we can do this is that let's do a height. We want the height to be, we can't say 100% because if we do 100%, it will be 100% of this. So we need to increase some values. What I was thinking about is top we add 10 pixels, bottom we add 10 pixels, left we add 10 pixels, right we add 10 pixels. In that we now get a consistent background color. So what we can do here, we can't add percentages to heights, but we can use the calculate function in CSS and say we want 100% height of the parent, and then we can add 10 pixels to the top and then 10 pixels to the bottom, which is equals to plus 20 pixels. So let's do the same for the width as well. We calculate the 100% of the parent, and then left and right pixels, it comes to 20 pixels. This is what we come up with. But now we need to place this in the middle. We cannot start at left, at top 0, because if we wanted to shift 10 pixels, we need to start from that 10 pixels. So we need to shift it -10, because positive should be inside, negative is outside. Left, we push it backwards 10 pixels. So we do -10 pixels. In the right hand side, we need to add 10 pixels. It's not removing. Right hand 0 is here. Right hand negative is this side. Right hand positive is this side. So we can now add 10 pixels. And then in the bottom as well, we are not subtracting, we are adding 10 pixels. So we can come here and do 10 pixels. All right. So, and then after doing that, we still have an issue. So then the top is 10 pixels. And then you can see now it sits exactly on top with 10 pixels all around itself. All right. So I think we could also use a border. Let's try using a border. I think this solution is too complex. Let's try using a border and see whether it will achieve. So you can say border 5 pixels solid red. I think this one will achieve the same result we wanted. So we can do 10 pixels. All right, I think this one can achieve the same issue, but this one could also achieve, but it's a long route. So, and then let's change the color to the color we pasted. And then let's use a hashtag. And then I think it looks exactly equals to what we had here in the final version. So this one looks, so the border brought some issues with the width and the height. Okay. So you could use the border, but it is, let's increase the width of the content as well, but okay. So we can do 90% there. Okay. That looks a bit nice. And that's it, guys. That's how you can create that card, that login form. This one could be a full page, but since here on TikTok, we cannot do full pages because of the screen sizes. That's it, guys. So make sure you like, follow, and share with your friends. Thank you.